Hi, you guys. So I am really pumped about this. I have Danielle here, and she literally does it all. I don't want to butcher everything, but I'll have you kind of introduce yourself in a minute. But we just met on Threads, and I'm like, I want to meet like more of these like somatic healers and more therapists and more people that are, really just doing the healing and helping people heal. And so you popped up and I love everything that you wrote. I'm like, hold on, like we need to talk. There's like polyvagal therapy. You're talking about this safe and sound protocol like that I've never even heard of. I'm just like, we have to dive in. So if you would introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how you got into this, I would love to start there.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so my name is Danielle Sampson. I'm a licensed clinical social worker based out of Buffalo, New York. I'm licensed in New York and Pennsylvania, so I can see therapy clients in both of those states. I am primarily a trauma therapist, working with individuals, couples, relationships, all through the lens of complex trauma. So I do a lot of EMDR therapy, which is very somatic based trauma therapy. I'm a certified schema therapist. I'm a certified safe and sound protocol practitioner. And I really just kind of got into it because, I started my own therapy as a client in 2016 when I started graduate school for my master's in social work. And I had never been to therapy before. Actually, I kind of thought therapy was stupid, which is funny because then I became a therapist, you know,
Yeah.
and throughout my time in therapy, I was like, okay, like, these thought reframing exercises are helpful to a point, but why does my body still feel like triggered when things happen? Like, I'm not even thinking about, oh, this person triggers me, but then the next 4 days after I see that person, then I'm super dysregulated and super irritable and upset and all those things, and that's when I kind of started being interested in more like, we need to go deeper with this. Like, we can't just be like top down, like, thinking about our experiences and things like that. Like, we have to kind of go further into how does our body experience that. And so that's how I've kind of been evolving my practice as time has gone on.
I love what you just said about truly like it's like we get a trigger and then we're holding on and holding on. I had maybe a similar experience where I did talk therapy for years and years, and not to bash it at all, it helped me through a part of the situation. It helped me to release some of the, things that I was going through. But then I could never like fully release and fully kind of like feel like myself again and just like let go until I found a somatic healer, and she taught me literally just simple somatic movement exercises, and it was insane. My patterns shifted so quick. I became like, I want to say like a whole new person, but really it came back to like my true self. But it was insane how well it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that talk therapy is great, and we have, I do a lot of it still, for people who are kind of like, "Ooh, I don't like that woo-woo stuff." um but I think it's a great introduction to therapy, and then a lot of times people, some people are fine with that being it, and then some people want more.
Yeah. Can we chat? I would love to. I know talking about EMDR might get a little deep. I would love to kind of do like a little overview of EMDR, and because that's something I've used before, and that helped me a lot, I know. But talking about maybe EMDR, like what it is, why you need to do that with somebody who is literally licensed, and because this is this can be a big trauma release. So I'd love to chat about why we come to somebody like you for this specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So basically, it takes this kind of theory, it's called the adaptive information processing model. Basically, the theory is that your memories, when you experience anything normal, right? Nothing traumatic or anything like that, your memories go to your short term memory part of the brain for up to 3 months. And then after 3 months, the memories are supposed to then shift over to long term memory. And that's why things from your childhood or whatever might fade away over time because they're in the long term memory. They're not as fresh. They're kind of stored away in in this garage or this, the basement of the brain or whatever. When something traumatic happens, this theory of EMDR basically says that those short-term memories get stuck in the short-term memory, right? So even if it happened 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, it still feels like it happened yesterday. So that memory stuck there. And so all of the responses and all of the body sensations and the thoughts and feelings that go along with that memory that was traumatic are right at the forefront. So that's where we're getting some flashbacks or nightmares or things like that that are symptoms of that traumatic experience. So EMDR basically takes bilateral stimulation, which is either eye movements, which is where the eye movement comes from, or I actually prefer tapping. So, like butterfly hug type of thing, like tapping back and forth. You can also use, there's different ways you could do headphones and have beeps in either ear back and forth, or there's music that has that integrated. There's a lot of different ways, but um, using that tapping can kind of desensitize that memory and help it get unstuck from the short term into and put it back into the long term memory where it belongs.
And can you touch on, I know, first of all, I just also want to tell you that I love how you explain things. I love this so much because it's like,
Thank you.
this can get so like deep and I can get so nerdy with this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I love this explanation. Like, you've given us the science, but like, we can grasp it. But how, like, I guess I want to just touch on the fact that this process can really unlock. So even if it's in that short-term memory, you can, by doing this, we can really unlock maybe some of the more vivid, recollection of these experiences, and how somebody like you would help us to work through that then.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of times, we have different coping strategies to get through the day, right? We're not, even if we've experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of us kind of compartmentalize or put that aside, or we, dissociate, we do other unhealthy coping behaviors, right? Like overeating or
Yes.
workaholism or whatever. You know, we
Yeah.
kind of try to find ways to like put that box in the back of the closet and not open it, right? So EMDR kind of like encourages you to like, let's take the box out of the closet and we'll open it and we don't know what's going to come out. And that's a
Yeah.
risk, and that can be really scary and hard for some people, right? And so that's why it's really important to have like someone who's trained and licensed to kind of see, oh, okay, this person is having this reaction to this traumatic memory. How do we stabilize them? And how do we keep
Yeah.
them safe until we meet them again next week or whenever. So, we do a lot of like stabilization and stuff before we go to active processing in order to make sure that the client is able to manage those triggers when they come up throughout the week. So a lot of times people will say they get a little bit worse before they get better with the MDR, just
Yeah.
because, you're kind of opening up that box, and like I
Yeah.
said, you might not know what's going to come out.
Yeah. And then there's that like reprogramming component where then it's like we can kind of come back into, I guess desensitizing, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then you want to also, the R part stands for like reprocessing. And so we're then installing, like a more positive belief, right? So a lot of times when you have a traumatic experience, it's associated with a belief about yourself or about the world, right? So, I'm in a terrible car accident, right? So then I have the belief that the world is not safe, you know? So throughout EMDR, we're kind of desensitizing that car accident image, seeing what else is coming up, what other beliefs or memories are associated with that belief of the world is not safe or I'm not safe, right? And then after it feels desensitized, then we want to install like the world is safe enough, right? You know, like I am
Mm.
safe enough in this world, and so that's where you're kind of replacing that negative belief with a more positive one.
It's so freaking powerful. Like, it's just so cool. And I think, too, from like the standpoint of a client, it's like just being able to show up. I don't have to. I remember before I would go to the talk therapy sessions, I would oftentimes, like, I'm such an overthinker and like I'm so analytical. I'm just like, okay, what am I going to talk about? And then if she asks me this, then I'll have to, like, tell her this. And I have to reassure, my therapist that blah, blah, blah. And I'm doing all the right things. And it's like, EMDR or these types of, healing practices, you just show up. I mean, I'm sure there's definitely, a little bit more than just showing up. Like we've got some homework and stuff to do at times, but I mean, generally, it's not like the overthinking part can go out the window. We can really
Mm,
just get into our body again. I think it's so freaking
right,
cool.
exactly.
It's amazing. Okay, I have to hear about Safe and Sound Protocol. I've never ever heard about that, which is baffling me.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think you're gonna love it too because it's so like up your alley. So basically, I learned about this probably about 6 months ago. The Safe and Sound protocol is based in polyvagal theory, which is all based on the autonomic nervous system. The system of your
Smelly,
body
right?
that controls. I'm sure all your listeners know about it, right? It controls your involuntary body functions, breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, all those things, right? And so the Safe and Sound protocol kind of says that people who have experienced trauma or they've experienced, anything stressful in their life, right? They might, their nervous system or their autonomic nervous system might be kind of perceiving danger even if there isn't danger, right? And like this is very similar to things that we talk about in EMDR and other trauma therapy also, right? And so what the Safe and Sound protocol is, it's a specifically filtered music that basically goes into your ear, and your auditory processing is a very strong conduit for your autonomic nervous system, and the filtering actually unsticks that. It's like kind of like a sticky lever in your ear or something that the lever's kind of stuck in the danger position, right? So that's where you get, you're super startled very easily, or I just feel anxious all the time, or my heart's racing and I don't know why, like those types of things. It's kind of like your nervous system is like stuck on overdrive, right? And the filtering of this music in the Safe and Sound protocol actually unsticks that lever, and it was originally developed for occupational therapists with to use with people with autism. And so it's really good for like sensory overload, sensory sensitivities, things like that. But then they also found it was great for trauma and nervous system regulation as well. So it's a 5 hour program. So you don't do all 5 hours at once because it can be
Right.
very intense. But you kind of go through with a practitioner, and then you can also listen on your own. And the music has a specific algorithm that stimulates different parts of your polyvagal system. And so throughout after the program, a lot of people say they're not as startled as easily. They're not like weird thing have some like food sensitivities like with textures that have been less sensitive since I've been going through that. So like foods that I would never touch before cuz they had like a weird texture. Now I'm like I didn't even realize I just ate that, like things like that. Things that, maybe would have caused a panic attack before are now not causing a panic attack. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, I feel safer in my body now after going through it. And so it's a really, really interesting program. So once I went through it as a client, I decided to get trained in it. And it works really well with preparing for EMDR and kind of like reducing that sensitivity to triggers and things like that.
Obsessed. I'm like, how do we do this? Okay, so will you be teaching this at some point or not? Teaching's not the right word, but having hosting clients in this, like having like a program or something.
Yeah, so actually, because this is not like the Safe and Sound protocol is not considered like therapy, it's kind of like a tool. So I can provide that to people in any state or any country or whatever. So I am planning on offering some online Safe and Sound protocol groups, probably one for like individuals and then one for couples because, I work a lot with couples, and I've noticed as I've been making my couples, or not making them, but, having my couples go through the program, they're like, "Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay, like something that usually bothers me about my husband is not triggering me as much lately. Like what's up with that?" And so I've been using it a lot in the couples space as well. So, yeah, so that is on the horizon for late summer, early fall to start providing those online groups.
Oh my gosh. We'll make sure that we're following along on Instagram so that we can get the shout out and find out when that happens. Because I truly believe we can be so much happier, right, in our lives when we are healing, when we're doing the healing. And there's always going to be triggers coming in. There's always going to be like, I think about that oftentimes, even how you referred, to couples. Like, even with my husband, I'm just like, there's little triggers, and it's like, I can't, change his life and be like, no, you're not allowed to like breathe.
Right.
But it's learning how to better cope with things that would normally trigger us. I mean, that's like the whole point. Like, so we
Hmm.
can live just such a better life.
Right. And the thing I like about the safe and sound protocol is that it's like your body's doing the work for you. And so, in the group that I went to as a client, we were the facilitator who's one of the main, she's like one of the, not the, one of the founders, but like one of the original like practitioners of it. We,
Mhm.
she brought all these coloring books, and people would bring like knitting and crochet and things like that, and all you have to do is put the headphones on and just kind of notice what's happening in your body. And people listen to it while they're doing dishes, people listen to it while they're cooking, or even just like sitting on the couch. Really, the only restrictions is that you can't, because it's activating your inner ear, you can't do things that are kind of like either your head is going up and down, so like yoga, you couldn't really do it while doing yoga, or
Okay.
or screens like scrolling, because like you can kind of
Yeah.
get motion sick, and so you wouldn't want to do it like in a car or on a plane or anything like that. But other than that, I mean, it's just kind of a nice, like, at the end of the day, like listening to 20 minutes, doing some relaxing coloring, or even just laying on the couch with your eyes closed, and your body's doing the work for you. So you don't have to think about anything. And that's what I love about it.
I'm like obsessed with that. Like, that's like my favorite thing. It's just like bypassing this whole like thinking process. Cause, and a lot of us here, like listening, on this podcast, I have like a lot of high achieving women, the women who are just like go, go, go all day long and like 50 million tasks. And it's like, yeah, you come home at the end of the day, there's too much going on in your brain all day long, too much thinking. So it's just awesome to be able to come home and like bypass that whole process and still be healing. So it's like you're going to become even more resilient to stressors and even more resilient to those triggers. And oh my gosh, I just can't wait. I'm
Hmm.
definitely so interested. I'm like, oh, I can't wait till you put this out. I'm going to be like signing up because I just
I would
can't
love to
wait
have
to
you.
hear how it helps. Yeah, like how freaking
Yeah.
cool. Just
Yeah, one
the
one
transfer.
really notable example was, we were in the group, and I was about maybe 3 hours into the 5 hour program, and an Amber Alert went off on all of our phones, and
Oh
it was
wow.
not a real Amber Alert; it was like a test or something. But and I have such a bad startle reflex, from things I've
Yeah.
experienced in my past, and it's actually embarrassing, like I just jump at everything, and literally the
Yeah.
Amber Alert went off, and I did not move, and I was just like,
Wow.
oh, okay, like something's happening here, and that was the moment where I was like, okay, I need to spread the word and like get this out to other people.
God, that's so cool. And also I think like, and maybe you can, chat about this for a minute, but there's something to also be said for like this whole nervous system regulation thing. It's like trending now and it's such a buzzword. And I think that people are misinterpreting it to believe that we are calm and non-reactive all the time. And we're just, I'm just chilling, I'm just on the couch drooling, right? And that's not what it is. Like, it's the ability to, and I'm gonna have you chat about this more because like you have all of the fancy words, but it's really like that ability to like, I can see the Amber Alert and I can see and I can process what's going on, but I'm not reacting the same way. I'm not constantly living in that sympathetic response.
Exactly. Yeah, so, I think you said it exactly right. Like when we're triggered, we're in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, right? That's that sympathetic activation, and we're not trying to get into shutdown, like
Yeah.
the a lot of times people think, like you said, drooling on the couch or whatever, like that to me sounds like shutdown, and so when I talk about it in the terms of EMDR, we talk about like the window of tolerance, right? So you've got this window, and the window kind of changes size depending on what's going on in your life. Are you tired? Are you hungry? Are you in pain? Are you stressed out? All of those things. affects the amount of, regulation that we have, right? And so then, if you're in that fight or flight response, usually, or fight response, really, you're in this hyper arousal, which is above the window, right? And that's where you're irritable, you're angry, or you're having a panic attack, you're super like elevated. Whereas if you're outside the window but below it, you're in that hypo arousal where you're shut down, you're depressed, you're numb, you're dissociated, things like that, right? And like the goal is to maintain the window so that, like you said, I can see that Amber Alert, I can have compassion. I mean, obviously, like I said, there wasn't a real Amber Alert, but I can see an Amber Alert, I can have compassion for it, but I'm not jumping right into, oh my God, I'm so triggered, my heart is racing, all these things. Or, oh, I see that Amber Alert and I'm immediately dissociating. Like, we're not,
Yeah.
regulation means that you can handle stressors with like it's kind of like waves on a boat, right? The boat might like move a little bit, but the boat eventually stabilizes. Whereas if you're dysregulated, the boat is flipping over, and then you're stuck in the ocean, right? So we want the boat to
Yeah.
be able to adjust to the waves of the ocean.
Oh, I love that analogy. Yes, so good. I was giving a little masterclass yesterday about this, and I'm like, it's almost like the gas and the brakes. And it's like you want to go on that scenic drive and just kind of use both. And yeah, we're trying, I don't want to be all gas and like, I
Right.
know where that's going.
Right.
I love
Yeah.
that so much. I want to just, can we shout out like where to find you? Like, what's your, also, actually, real fast, I have a question. I think it's probably going to be a hard question because it's so individualized. But if you had a client coming to you and was just like, I just don't even know where to start, like, just help me. Like, is there a type of practice that you would first recommend, or would it just be more so like a very individualized approach?
Yeah, it's pretty individualized. I would say that a lot of times, if people come to me and they're like, I really want trauma therapy, right? Like, I usually start off by just getting to know them for a few sessions, right? Because I want to be able to tune into their nervous system and understand, how regulated is this person on a daily basis, right? Do they need to build skills? Do they need to get out of their brain and into their body a little bit, right? So I often will kind of, people come and they're like, I really want to start EMDR right now, and I'll be like, okay,
Yeah.
I want to get to know you. And like, it's like that co-regulation. I want to tune into, your regulation first and just kind of see, what skills do you need before we go deep and open that Pandora's box. So I always tell people I'll go as slow or as quickly as you can handle and as you want, because obviously if you've got, a ton of stress in your personal life and things like that, a lot of triggers going on, do we want to open Pandora's box right now, or do we want to focus on stabilizing first, maybe do the safe and sound protocol, help reduce some of that reactivity, and then after, that reactivity is better, your window of tolerance is larger, then we can maybe do some trauma processing. So it is pretty individualized, but I would say, I do like to kind of start slow and just get to know people first.
That makes so much sense. And it's really learning. I love what you mentioned. I'm so glad you mentioned that about like not opening the entire box and everything when, there's so much going on already in your life, so it's really getting a sense for that individual person and really figuring it out on that kind of individual basis rather than it's not like a blanket, right? It's not like a one size fits all kind of a approach. Like, yeah. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. Okay, where can we find you? How do we stay in touch? Tell us all the things.
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at Getting By Together. I am on, Facebook and Threads, also as Getting By Together, or on Danielle Sampson. I am My website is traumatherapybuffalo.com. Like I said, if you come to me for therapy, I can only work with people in New York and Pennsylvania, but the Safe and Sound protocol and other kind of online, more like coaching types of things are open to everyone. So, definitely keep an eye out for that, as well as signing up for my newsletter, which you can do at my website or on Instagram. And yeah, I think that's it.
I do
I
too.
really appreciate you having me on. And letting me
Thank
share
you.
all my trauma stuff.
Yeah, I know, I love it. I'm like obsessed. Like this conversation has lit me up. You have no idea. You have no idea right now. I'm like loving this. And I'll get the link from you for, how we sign up to get your newsletter, and I'll put it in the show notes because I mean, I need to sign up. This is like I love this stuff. All of the tips and tricks, like, yes, teach me everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.